come to me, Arche, for without you there is neither breath nor beginning, nor can any man live, love or learn without the spark of your spirit. When juxtaposed with the morally ambiguous Daedric princes, it's quite easy to perceive the Divines as one-dimensional deities. They are tied permanently to the mortal realm, and thus they could never harbour ill will against mortals. They are the Earthbones, the foundational forces that hold the material world together, and on top of their seemingly superficial spheres, they are also disconnected from mortals, rarely manifesting before them like the princes so often do. As a result, worship of the Divines is much more reliant on faith. A heretic may be swayed by the influence of the Daedra when they see Oblivion Gates open en masse across Tamriel. The Aedra work in more subtle ways, testing the mettle of their followers. When the avatar of Akatosh arose in the form of a brilliant golden dragon to thwart Mehrunes Dagon, it was over in an instant. The resilience of the people was rewarded, and their faith was immortalised in stone. Such is the way of the Divines. They are everywhere at once, yet they are taken for granted. Every breath inhaled is Kynareth. Every passing second is Akatosh. Every stroke of genius is Julianos, and every newborn child is blessed by Arche. The Nine have said, "Repent and do good works, and the fountains of grace shall once more spill forth upon you." As a Daedrologist, I'm guilty of overlooking the Aedra as well. Their personalities are far less amorphous, and their deeds are not woven with obscure philosophies. But the Aedra keep the balance, and they keep the Daedra in check. They created this world, and their influence is more potent because of it. I recently shared my studies on the Daedra Lord Namira, the Prince of the Ancient Darkness, and I warned you not to worship her. To this day, I still feel the murky tendrils of her endless shadow trying to envelop the corners of my mind. In fact, she was so intimidating that she caused me to make an uncharacteristic mistake regarding the evolutionary phases of a certain Pokemon. But that's neither here nor there. I pondered for some time why mortals weren't enticed by Namira's darkness, and I landed on one major reason. This reason is Arche. His influence on mortals is why we have hope. He is the reason we persevere through mortal suffering and nihilism. Hey guys, it's Drew the Daedrologist here, and welcome back to Fudge Muppet. In this video, I'll be beginning my research on the Aedra, and I hope to use my knowledge of the Daedra as a means to better understand their importance. Our first subject will be Arche, the mortal's god. Arche says, "Honour the earth, its creatures, and the spirits, living and dead. Guard and tend the bounties of the mortal world, and do not profane the spirits of the dead." Arche is the lord of the wheel of life, the god of the cycle of birth and death, and the patron of burials and funeral rites. Arche's exact origins are not clear. Very little is clear about the early stages of Mundus' development. Some believe he is an original spirit just like the other Aedra and Daedra, while others claim he is the son of Akatosh and Mara. A smaller minority of scholars even claim he was formerly a mortal who ascended to godhood with Mara's help. But I believe the most likely origin comes from the monomyth, which claims that Arche was one of the first spirits to crystallise after the introduction of time. After all, what good is the cycle of life and death if there is no time? Arche's sphere is completely redundant without the existence of perishable mortals. Regardless, Arche fits the role of Akatosh's son well. He's the equivalent to the Christian father-son mythos. It doesn't matter whether it's literal or figurative. What does matter is that he feels more relatable to mortals this way. He seems more connected to their struggle if he himself was born into the world, rather than being an eternal force. Arche is often associated with the turning of the seasons, which is an area of his sphere that ties closely to Kynareth, the goddess of the heavens, the winds, the elements and the rains down in Argonia. But the key difference between the two is that Kynareth manifests as the literal elements. She's the rain that quenches the thirst of the flora. She is also the nurturing light of the sun, which is a necessity for growth. Arche resembles the seasons in the sense that they herald the death and rebirth of the wilderness. So when the trees shed their leaves at the start of Hearthfire, that is the end of the cycle. And when they blossom again in first seed, that is the cycle beginning anew. As I'm sure you can deduce from his sphere of life and death, Arche abhors necromancy, as well as any other means of unnaturally extending one's lifespan. Breaking the cycle of life is a reprehensible and selfish act, and his followers are staunch opponents of the undead. The most notable sect of his worshippers are the Order of Arche, and their military force are called the Knights of the Circle. The Order live by the following creed: We are the Order of Arkay, the god of birth and death. Arkay is the great spirit who brings every man and woman, human, elf, Khajiit and Argonian into this world, and when their time is true, ends their circle. Arkay is fertility and blight, joy and sorrow. At the Order, we celebrate the blessed neutrality that Arkay stands for. While we do not offer strangers blessings, for to give favour or curse would be to upset the eternal balance, the Order offers much to its members. Our libraries and sages are some of the finest in Tamriel. Of course, few are worthy to be initiated into the mysteries of birth and death. Arkay's hatred for those who wish to cheat the cycle would explain why he is mostly revered by men. The Bosmer are an exception, as they include him in their pantheon, but for races like the Dunmer or the Altmer, mortality is not so straightforward. And by straightforward, I mean simply a circle. Poor choice of wording, I know. Anyway, take the High Elves for example. To them, mortality is a cruel trick played on them by Lorkhan. Extreme factions like the Falmor will give anything to deconstruct the mortal realm, and escape the finality of death altogether. What good would it do them to venerate a god who encourages what they perceive as torment? So why is Arkay so important then? And why is he the solution to Namira's darkness as I claimed at the beginning of the video? Well, as I spoke about in my Namira video, this Daedric prince makes it her duty to coax mortals into self-pity. If Arkay is the equivalent to the Christian Son of God, then Namira is the embodiment of the sin of sloth. Why work tirelessly to make a better world for future generations if you're just going to die anyway? You don't get to enjoy the fruits of your labour. Life is pain, says Namira, so how about you crawl into this dark cavern and wallow in your own waste until the scuttling void sucks out what's left of your soul. It is Arkay's responsibility to justify the cruelty of mortality, and that's no easy feat. Arkay's answer was the circle, the wheel of life. The priests of Arkay will assure mortals that death is not meaningless. Instead, it serves the most noble purpose imaginable. It feeds new life. It's a cycle, and you can't have one without the other. This notion is what gives the elderly and the sickly peace of mind as they cross over to the afterlife. And it also plays into the importance of funerals and burial rites. Once again, Namira could make the practical argument that funerals are superstitious, nonsensical farces, as the dead don't know or care if people turn up to mourn for their passing. But that's not the point. Funerals bring closure and help the living reconcile the sorrow of losing a loved one. Burials also complete the metaphorical circle of life and death. We return to the soil so that new life can grow from the compost. What's funny about Arkay, and all the Daedra for that matter, is the fact that there is a deeper meaning to his sphere. I originally stated that the Divines were one-dimensional when compared to the Daedra, but there is much more to interpret than initially meets the eye. Arkay's influence is more than simply giving people an imaginary sense of purpose and the ability to deal with sorrow. There is also a hidden truth within his sphere. Mortals always bury their dead. It would be considered an egregious crime against humanity to just let your dead rot in piles in the gutter. Not respecting burial rites would cause all populated spaces to stink with the odour of decay. Dumping corpses wherever you fancy, like in a lake or water source, could also cause contamination. In most cases, this would just cause gastrointestinal concerns. But what about serious infectious diseases like the blight? If the people of Morrowind didn't have such a profound respect for their ancestors, they would be in a lot of trouble. But because they cremate their dead, they have a much more sanitary environment. The Dunmer may not revere Arkay directly, but this is a good example of the significance of his sphere. Both spiritually and practically, the circle of life is essential to mortals. It is no surprise that during the Oblivion Crisis, it is a group of Arkay's faithful who attempted to bring Namira's Forgotten Ones back to the light. Those Daedra worshippers offered nothing for the good of mortality. They were just volatile squatters who got lost in the ancient darkness. Those priests of Arkay, however, they risked their lives to save the wretched ones, comforted by the knowledge that Arkay, the Lord of the living and the dead, would secure their souls' passage to the afterlife when their time eventually came. And there you have it, guys, why Arkay's divine light is the solution to Namira's ever-encroaching darkness. I hope you enjoyed the first instalment to my Aedrology series. It doesn't quite have the same ring to it as Daedrology, but for my own safety I think it's wise to talk more about some of the less dangerous deities. If you have any requests for what god to analyse next, or any other lore you'd like me to delve into, feel free to suggest them in the comments. Thanks so much for watching everyone, my name is Drew, and I'll see you in the next one.